Georgia who faked the Bigfoot last year. They got tons of coverage, of course, all over the world. It's amazing the coverage they got by taking what amounted to a fake body stuffed full of guts, possum parts and sheep parts, pig parts and things, and working out an arrangement in order to sell it, or the rights to it, for $50,000 to an investor from Indiana who believed that this was real. After this was all exposed as a hoax, I became really intrigued with this because I wanted to see how they had been so convincing with such a crude method. Every year, my team and I produce what's called the Speaking of Strange UFO Experience, because I host a radio program called Speaking of Strange. And we go out into a field and we get some of the most creative people all over the southeast, if not the country, to come and create a fake UFO. And then we launch them at night and we see if they look like they could be something that would fool you if you saw it in your backyard. And I wonder how hoaxing affects some of the things we do in this field, because I believe it goes on more than you would imagine. So it became important for me to create a hoax research center, which is a part of our laboratory, where we are studying hoaxing, because we feel like the best way to rule out a hoax is to understand the earmarks, the red flags of a hoax. So I contacted these good old boys in Georgia, and I said, tell me your story. Tell me what you haven't put in the media. How did this all happen? Very simply, these guys, one of them was a police officer named Matt Witten. The other, Rick Dyer, was a tow truck operator. He said that they'd been hiking in the woods together, and then at some point, one of them said, hey, maybe we'll see a Bigfoot out here. Now, this was in the mountains of North Georgia. And then they started talking about Bigfoot. And then one of them said, why is it that nobody ever finds a dead Bigfoot anywhere? And so they started thinking about this more and more. They went back home and they told their friends, yeah, we went hiking. Anything interesting happened? Well, yeah, we found a dead Bigfoot out there. Why? Everybody began believing that they had actually found something. It was a big prank. They continued telling people, yeah, we got a dead Bigfoot. They started getting calls from radio shows. They went on to at least one significant radio show, got a lot of attention in the community, the paranormal community. And then there was a gentleman named Tom Biscardi who contacted them and said, hey, if you've got a Bigfoot, then let's make some money off this thing. And that's where they started getting into the business of the hoax. I don't know who all was responsible for what, but the guys created their fake Bigfoot, and it was supposed to be all organic. But they waited till the last minute. They weren't very smart about things, and so they then decided they were going to take a Bigfoot costume, which is about the dumbest thing you can imagine, a costume which exists out there with some degree of regularity, and they filled it with these fake body parts, poured it in a block of ice, and then they made the rounds with it until finally there was somebody who was out of their control on hand when the thawing began, who saw this is rubber and went screaming to the media. There was a big lawsuit that came into play over that whole situation, and I contacted those guys and I said, can I see this thing? Because I would like to see if I would have been fooled by this. And they told me, well, we don't have it anymore. It exists with the investor in Indiana. He's the guy who has it now. And so I asked them, well, in that case, would it be possible for me to go see it in Indiana? And they said, well, we don't think so. He wants his money, his $50,000, before anybody sees it. So I started thinking about this whole big, confusing, ridiculous mess that these guys had created, which just took the credibility of cryptozoology right down the tubes for a while. And I said, well, look, if you have been so successful in fooling people with this fake Bigfoot, then how about, in order to get this guy his $50,000 back, put the thing on eBay, sell it as a curiosity, because I can't be the only person in the world who wants to see what this thing looked like. Take the $50,000, give it back to the guy who lost his money, and put all the rest of it into legitimate research. Send it to real cryptozoologists. Put some of it to our hoax research center. Maybe something good could come out of your deception. And they agreed to it. All the parties agreed. I put the thing on eBay. It made the cover of CNN and Fox News, and it was all over the world, China, you name it. The winning bid was over $250,000. So I thought, wow, this is a pretty good deal for everybody. The guy gets his 50 grand back. Now we have $200,000 that will go to cryptozoologists like, Lauren Coleman or Jeff Meldrum. We could put some money into the Hoax Research Center. But as it turned out, the winning bidder was somebody who apparently had a personal vendetta against those guys, a resident of Georgia, and had used what's called an eBay sniping program. It's a little automatic program that automatically outbids every single legitimate bid that comes in to make sure that no legitimate bidder would get it. So we said, fine. We realized the winning bid was a hoax as well, was a fake, was a fraud, which of course is against the law and is being pursued as such. I went back to all the legitimate bidders, because there were over 100 of them, and asking them if they would like to stand by the bid they made. As fate would have it, that coincided perfectly with the initial collapse of the economy back in October, if you remember. And at that point, all these people were having second thoughts. And so to this date, that body is still stuck in a warehouse somewhere, sitting there rotting away, I guess. And all this is being settled in the courts. And I'm not going to try anymore to produce something positive from it. So whether or not many of these Bigfoot stories and investigations and expeditions are hoaxes, I have in my possession a couple things that I also wanted to put on display for you tonight. These are a couple of casts that the legitimate cryptozoologists claim come from a real Bigfoot. Now, I will tell you that I personally do not believe there is an 800-pound gorilla-type primate that's running around this country that is an ordinary biological organism. I wrote a book called Pet Ghosts. I hate that name. I didn't give it that name. The publisher did, because it's really a book about non-human apparitions. And in the book, I make the case for the fact that I believe there are some creatures out there which are interdimensional. And it may sound extreme to just throw it out there, but when you look at the facts, there is nothing scientifically to tell us that life cannot exist in realms that are not physical to you and me. And there might be some on the boundary that are able to slip back and forth. So most of the so-called legitimate cryptozoologists believe that these are casts of so-called real Bigfoot. This one right here, actually both of these that I brought to you, are from the Roger Patterson Bigfoot area. I'm not saying these are supposedly from the creature. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not that footage was real. But this was taken near Bluff Creek, California on October 21st, 1964. And I believe this thing is around 16 inches. So if you compare it to a regular guy's foot, I'm 6'2". You can see it's a pretty big foot, not to mention the width. This is believed to be from a male Bigfoot. And this is believed to be from a female Bigfoot. This was taken in that same area around 1967.